dass der so schnell frei. Unfall. Unfall.
The rain had started around 6 that evening, the kind of persistent November drizzle that turned Manhattan streets into rivers of reflected neon and brake lights. Emma Walsh pressed her forehead against the cold glass of the staff entrance, watching the city blur behind the water streaming down the window. Her reflection stared back, tired eyes, dark hair pulled into a practical bun, the crisp white shirt and black vest of Côte d'Azur's uniform, somehow making her look both professional and invisible at the same time. Emma, table 12 needs water refills, and the couple at 15 is ready to order. Sarah's voice cut through her moment of respite. Her fellow server rushed past with a tray of appetizers, the scent of truffle oil and seared scallops trailing behind her. Got it. Emma grabbed her pitcher and notepad, straightening her vest. Another Thursday night, another shift that would blur into Friday morning. She'd been working doubles at Côte d'Azur for 8 months now, ever since her mother's medical bills had started piling up faster than her adjunct teaching salary could cover. The restaurant job was supposed to be temporary, just until she finished her master's degree in social work, just until her mom's treatment was complete, just until she could breathe again. Temporary had a way of becoming permanent when you weren't paying attention. The dining room hummed with the particular energy of Manhattan's elite at play. Côte d'Azur occupied a prime corner in Tribeca, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of the rain-soaked streets below. Inside, warm lighting reflected off polished mahogany and brass fixtures, creating an atmosphere of old-world elegance mixed with modern luxury. The clientele matched the decor: expensive suits, designer dresses, jewelry that cost more than Emma's annual tuition. She moved through her section with practiced efficiency, refilling water glasses with a smile, taking orders with attentive nods, becoming the kind of invisible that good servers mastered. Present but not intrusive, helpful but not hovering. It was a performance she'd perfected, even as her mind calculated tips, rent due dates, and how many more months until graduation. Emma, Michael, the floor manager, appeared at her elbow. His expression carried that particular tightness that meant something important and probably complicated was about to happen. I need you to take over Section 7. She glanced toward the back of the restaurant where the private booths offered more seclusion for guests who valued privacy. Section 7 was Sarah's territory, and servers didn't typically swap sections mid-shift without good reason. Sarah's handling a situation with a difficult customer up front, Michael continued, lowering his voice. The guest in booth 7 is particular about his service. I need someone who won't get flustered. Emma wanted to point out that she already had a full section, that her feet ached, that she'd been on since noon and still had 4 hours to go. Instead, she nodded. Bills didn't care about sore feet or exhaustion. Of course. What do I need to know? His name is Mr. Moretti. He's a regular, though you might not have seen him. He usually comes in on Tuesdays. Drinks scotch, neat. Prefers the filet mignon, medium rare. Doesn't like small talk but appreciates efficiency. Michael paused, his expression unreadable. And Emma? Be professional but don't ask questions, understand? The warning sent a small shiver down her spine, though she wasn't sure why. Côte d'Azur attracted plenty of wealthy guests who valued discretion. She'd served celebrities, politicians, business moguls who conducted deals over Dover Sole and Dom Perignon. The restaurant's reputation was built partly on its ability to provide privacy. Understood, she said. Booth 7 sat in the farthest corner of the restaurant, partially screened by a decorative partition of frosted glass and dark wood. As Emma approached, she could see the silhouette of a man sitting alone, his posture radiating the kind of confidence that came from never doubting your right to occupy any space. She rounded the partition with her professional smile in place. Good evening, Mr. Moretti. My name is Emma, and I'll be taking care of you this evening. Can I start you with something to drink? Vincent Moretti looked up from his phone, and Emma felt the full force of his attention like a physical thing. He was perhaps in his late 30s, with dark hair touched with gray at the temples, sharp features that might have been severe if not for the slight curve of his mouth and eyes that seemed to assess and catalog everything in a single glance. His suit was impeccably tailored, charcoal gray with subtle pinstripes, a burgundy tie that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "McAllen, 25, neat," he said, his voice smooth, educated, with the faintest trace of a New York accent underneath the polish. "And bring me your menu, though I likely won't need it." "Of course." Emma jotted down the order, acutely aware of those dark eyes following her movements. "I'll have that right out for you." As she turned to leave, he spoke again. "You're new to this section. It wasn't a question, but she paused, turning back with a polite smile. Just filling in for tonight, sir. But I assure you the service will be excellent. Something that might have been amusement flickered across his features. I'm sure it will be. Emma retreated to the bar, placing the drink order with James, who raised an eyebrow at the expensive scotch but said nothing. While she waited, she observed her new charge from a distance. Vincent Moretti sat with the stillness of someone completely comfortable in his own skin, occasionally glancing at his phone, but mostly watching the room with the alertness of a person who habitually assessed his surroundings. There was something about him that didn't quite fit the usual pattern of Côte d'Azur's clientele. The other wealthy guests wore their privilege casually, born into it or so accustomed to it that it had become invisible. Vincent Moretti wore his power differently. Like armor he'd forged himself, every inch of it earned and defended. Table 7 scotch. James slid the crystal glass across the bar, breaking her observation. Tell Michael that's $300 he just poured. Emma carefully carried the drink back to booth 7, setting it down on the mahogany table with practiced precision. Your Macallan 25, sir. Have you had a chance to look at the menu, or would you like a few more minutes? The filet mignon, medium rare. No sauce, just as it comes. Asparagus on the side, no butter. His orders were crisp, definitive. A man who knew exactly what he wanted and saw no reason to deliberate. Excellent choice. I'll have that right out for you. The next hour passed in the rhythm of service. Emma moved between her tables, taking orders, delivering food, ensuring wine glasses stayed filled and conversations flowed uninterrupted. Booth 7 remained an island of quiet in the restaurant's gentle buzz. Vincent Moretti ate his meal with the same focused attention he seemed to bring to everything, occasionally pausing to respond to messages on his phone. Around 9:30, Emma noticed 2 men enter the restaurant. They were shown to a table near the window, but something about them immediately set her instincts on edge. Maybe it was the way they sat without really settling, bodies tense despite the casual arrangement of their chairs. Maybe it was how their eyes constantly scanned the room, lingering too long on booth 7. Maybe it was simply the disconnect between their expensive clothing and the hardness in their faces, like children playing dress-up in their parents' closets. She pushed the feeling aside, returning to booth 7 to clear Vincent's dinner plates. How was everything, Mr. Moretti? Perfect, as always. He leaned back slightly, studying her with that same assessing gaze. You handle pressure well. The observation caught her off guard. I'm sorry. You've been working this entire section plus your own for over an hour. Your feet probably hurt. You're likely exhausted, but you haven't let it show once. That takes discipline. Emma wasn't sure how to respond to that. Most customers didn't notice servers beyond their immediate needs. Just doing my job, sir. Yes, he agreed, something unreadable in his expression. But you do it well. Before she could formulate a response, one of the men from the window table stood and began walking toward the restrooms. The path took him past booth 7, and as he passed, his eyes fixed on Vincent with an intensity that made Emma's breath catch. The man's hand moved to his jacket. Time seemed to slow, each second stretching into impossible length. Emma saw the movement, saw the man's fingers slide inside his jacket, saw the deliberate intent in his eyes. Her mind, operating on some primal level beyond conscious thought, registered danger, immediate, lethal danger. She heard the sound, a mechanical click, sharp and unmistakable, metal against metal, a sound that her brain instantly recognized even though she'd never heard it in person before. Emma moved. Later, she wouldn't remember making the decision. Her body simply acted, driven by instinct and a split-second understanding that someone was about to die if she didn't move right now. She threw herself forward, her body colliding with Vincent's shoulder, pushing him down and back even as she heard the sound she'd only heard in movies. A sharp crack that seemed impossibly loud and yet distant at the same time. The world exploded into chaos. Screaming erupted throughout the restaurant. People dove under tables, chairs toppled as guests scrambled for cover. Emma found herself pressed against Vincent Moretti in the corner of the booth, his body tensed like a coiled spring beneath her. Her shoulder burned, a hot, searing pain that she couldn't quite process through the adrenaline flooding her system. More sounds, shouting, heavy footfalls, the crash of something breaking. Strong hands gripped her arms, pulling her back, and she caught a glimpse of 2 large men in dark suits wrestling the shooter to the ground. The weapon clattered across the floor, sliding to a stop near the overturned table where the shooter's companion sat frozen, hands raised in surrender. Don't move. Vincent's voice cut through the chaos, calm and commanding. His hand pressed against her shoulder and she looked down to see red spreading across her white shirt. "You're injured." "I'm fine," she heard herself say, though her voice sounded strange, distant. "Are you... Did he... I'm unharmed, thanks to you." His dark eyes fixed on hers with an intensity that made everything else fade into background noise. "Stay still. Help is coming." The restaurant had descended into organized chaos. Michael was on the phone, presumably with emergency services. Other staff members were helping frightened guests toward the exits. The two men who'd subdued the shooter held him face down on the floor. Security, Emma's dazed mind supplied, though she hadn't noticed them before. They must have been watching Vincent all along. Her shoulder throbbed, the initial sharp pain giving way to a deeper ache. She tried to sit up, but Vincent's hand remained firm against her uninjured shoulder. "I said stay still," he repeated, gentler this time. "You're in shock. The bullet grazed you, but you're losing blood." Blood. She was bleeding. The realization made her lightheaded, and she let herself sink back against the booth's leather cushion. Vincent shrugged out of his jacket and pressed it against her shoulder, applying steady pressure. His movements were efficient, practiced, someone who knew how to handle emergencies. "What's your full name?" he asked, his voice cutting through the fog, beginning to cloud her thoughts. Emma Walsh. Emma Walsh." He repeated it as though committing it to memory. "Stay with me, Emma. Keep your eyes open. Look at me." She focused on his face, using it as an anchor against the dizziness threatening to pull her under. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, a small scar near his left temple, the precise trimming of his beard. His cologne was subtle, expensive, cedar and something darker, more complex. "Why did you do that?" he asked quietly, almost to himself. "You didn't hesitate." "I heard the click," Emma whispered. "I just moved." Something flickered across his expression. Surprise, respect, something else she couldn't identify. Before he could respond, the restaurant filled with new arrivals. Police officers, their presence immediately commanding attention. Paramedics rushing in with equipment and practiced urgency. "Sir, we need to look at her." A young paramedic with kind eyes knelt beside the booth. Vincent moved back, allowing the medical professionals access, but his gaze never left Emma's face. She felt their hands on her shoulder, heard their calm voices assessing the injury, but her attention remained fixed on Vincent Moretti, who watched her with an expression she couldn't decipher. "You're very lucky," the paramedic told her, working to stop the bleeding. "The bullet just grazed you. Another inch and, well, you're lucky. We need to take you to the hospital, clean and dress this properly. You'll need stitches." Emma nodded, the movement making her wince. The paramedics helped her onto a stretcher, and as they prepared to move her, she caught sight of the restaurant. Tables overturned, broken glass glittering on the floor, police officers taking statements from shaken guests. The beautiful, elegant dining room had been transformed into something else entirely, a reminder that violence could shatter any illusion of safety. Her eyes found the shooter, now being hauled to his feet by police officers, handcuffs glinting. He was younger than she'd initially thought, maybe late 20s, with the desperate look of someone who'd gambled everything and lost. He wasn't looking at Vincent anymore. He was looking at her, and in his eyes was a mixture of fury and something that might have been fear. "Let's go," the paramedic said gently, breaking her focus. They wheeled her toward the exit, and Emma caught one last glimpse of Vincent Moretti, standing amid the chaos in his expensive vest and shirt, her blood staining both. His phone was pressed to his ear, his expression carved from stone as he spoke to whoever was on the other end. Michael appeared beside the stretcher as they moved through the restaurant. "Emma, God, I'm so sorry. I never thought, I didn't know." "It's not your fault," she managed, though her voice felt thin. "I'll be okay." "Your mom," he said suddenly. "Do you want me to call her?" "No." The word came out sharper than intended. "No, please don't. She'll just worry. I'll call her later after I know what's happening." The last thing her mother needed was to panic about her daughter being caught in a shooting. The stress alone could set back her recovery. Emma would tell her eventually, would spin it into something less terrifying, but not tonight. The ambulance ride passed in a blur of streetlights and the paramedic's steady voice checking her vital signs. The hospital was bright, too bright after the dimness of the restaurant, all white walls and antiseptic smell and efficient movement. Nurses took her information. Doctors examined her wound, asked questions she answered automatically. "You're very fortunate," the doctor told her. an older woman with gentle hands and tired eyes. The bullet created a superficial wound along your shoulder. Painful, and you'll have a scar but no permanent damage. We'll clean it, stitch it up, and you'll need to keep it dry for a few days. I'm prescribing antibiotics to prevent infection and something for the pain. When can I go home? Emma asked. Once we finish the stitches and observe you for another hour or so. We want to make sure there's no delayed shock reaction. The doctor paused. The police will want to speak with you as well. Right, the police. Emma let her head fall back against the pillow, exhaustion finally catching up with her. She'd thrown herself in front of a stranger to stop him from being hurt. That stranger had turned out to be someone important enough to have security guards she hadn't noticed. Someone whose would-be attacker had been desperate or angry enough to try something in a crowded restaurant. What exactly had she stepped into? The stitches hurt despite the local anesthetic, each pull of the suture a reminder of how dramatically her evening had diverged from the norm. She closed her eyes, trying to process everything that had happened, but the events felt surreal, like something from a movie rather than her actual life. Ms. Walsh? Emma opened her eyes to find a police detective standing beside her bed. He was middle-aged, with gray hair and the weathered face of someone who'd seen too much of humanity's worst impulses. I'm Detective Morrison. I need to ask you some questions about what happened tonight. For the next 20 minutes, Emma recounted the evening step by step. The detective took notes, occasionally asking for clarification, his expression remaining carefully neutral throughout. When she described hearing the click and throwing herself forward, his eyebrows rose slightly. That was incredibly brave, he said, and incredibly dangerous. You could have been hurt much worse than you were. I didn't really think about it, Emma admitted. I just reacted. Instinct, Morrison nodded. Sometimes that's what saves lives. He closed his notebook, studying her with eyes that had conducted 1,000 interviews. Ms. Walsh, do you know who Vincent Moretti is? The question felt loaded. Careful. He's a customer at the restaurant. That's all I know. Morrison's expression suggested he was deciding how much to tell her. Mr. Moretti is a prominent businessman in New York. He has interests in several industries: construction, real estate, waste management. He's also a person of interest in several ongoing investigations, though he's never been charged with anything. The careful phrasing told Emma everything the detective wasn't saying outright. Vincent Moretti was connected to organized crime, the kind of man whose business dealings existed in gray areas between legal and illegal, the kind of man who had enemies willing to try taking him out in a public restaurant. Oh, she said quietly, the man who tried to harm Mr. Moretti tonight has connections to a rival organization. This wasn't random, it was targeted. Morrison leaned forward slightly. Which means, Ms. Walsh, that by saving Vincent Moretti's life, you've potentially put yourself in a complicated position. These people don't forget, they don't forgive, and they have long memories. Emma felt her stomach drop. Are you saying I'm in danger? I'm saying you should be aware of the situation. Mr. Moretti has already provided contact information for his security team should you need it. He's also arranged to cover all your medical expenses tonight. He didn't need to do that. No, Morrison agreed. But men like Vincent Moretti understand debts, particularly life debts. He owes you, Ms. Walsh, and he knows it. The detective stood, handing her a business card. If you remember anything else, or if anything unusual happens, anything at all, you call me. Understood? Emma took the card, her fingers numb. Understood. After Morrison left, Emma sat in the sterile hospital room trying to process everything. She'd come to work expecting an ordinary shift, tips, and tired feet and the usual parade of wealthy customers. Instead, she'd become entangled with a man who existed in a world she'd only seen in movies, a world of organized crime, rival factions, and carefully calculated moves. Her phone buzzed. 3 missed calls from Michael, 5 from Sarah, and a dozen text messages from coworkers who'd heard what happened. She scrolled through them, unable to formulate responses, her mind too scattered to form coherent thoughts. A soft knock on the door frame made her look up. A nurse stood there, young and apologetic. Ms. Walsh? You have a visitor. He says his name is Mr. Moretti. Emma's heart jumped inexplicably. Yes. Okay. The nurse stepped aside and Vincent Moretti entered her hospital room. He'd changed clothes at some point, now wearing dark slacks and a black sweater, his hair slightly damp as though he'd showered. He carried himself with the same quiet authority she'd noticed at the restaurant, but up close, without the barrier of professional distance, his presence felt even more substantial. Ms. Walsh, He stopped a respectful distance from her bed. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got shot," she said, then immediately winced at her own bluntness. "Sorry, that was accurate." A slight smile touched his mouth. "I appreciate honesty. The doctors tell me you'll make a full recovery." "Yes, they said I was lucky." "Lucky?" Vincent repeated the word as though testing its weight. That's one way to describe it, though I'd argue luck had less to do with it than remarkable instinct and courage. Emma didn't know what to say to that. She pulled the hospital blanket higher, suddenly aware of her disheveled appearance, hair falling out of its bun, her face probably pale, wearing a hospital gown that smelled of antiseptic. He, meanwhile, looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine spread even after the evening's chaos. "Detective Morrison told you about me," Vincent said. It wasn't a question. "He told me you're a businessman." That slight smile returned. "A diplomatic phrasing. I'm sure he also told you that my business dealings exist in complicated territories." "Something like that." Vincent pulled a chair closer to her bed, sitting down with fluid grace. Up close, she could see the fatigue around his eyes, the tension in his shoulders beneath the expensive sweater. Whatever calm facade he presented to the world, tonight had shaken him too. "I need to be honest with you, Emma." "May I call you Emma?" She nodded. "What you did tonight, saving my life, was extraordinary. It was also incredibly dangerous, not just in the moment but going forward. The man who tried to harm me works for people who will see your interference as a problem. You prevented something they spent considerable time and resources planning. They won't be happy about that." Detective Morrison suggested something similar. "Morrison is a good detective and a careful man. He's probably downplaying it." Vincent leaned forward slightly, his dark eyes intense. "I want to offer you protection. My security team is experienced, discreet. They can watch over you, make sure nothing happens in retaliation." Emma's first instinct was to refuse. She didn't want to be drawn further into whatever world Vincent inhabited. But the practical part of her mind, the part that had kept her afloat through student loans and medical bills and endless double shifts, recognized the reality of her situation. If she really was in danger, pride wouldn't protect her. "For how long?" she asked. "Until the situation settles. A few weeks, perhaps longer." He paused. "I'm also aware that tonight will likely cost you your job. Côte d'Azur's management won't want the attention or potential danger. I'd like to compensate you for that loss and for your medical expenses, and for the trauma of what you experienced." "You don't need to." "I do," he interrupted gently but firmly. "You saved my life, Emma. That creates a debt I take very seriously. Let me at least ensure you don't suffer financially for your courage." She wanted to argue, wanted to maintain her independence, but the reality was undeniable. Her shoulder throbbed, her white work shirt was ruined with blood, and she'd likely be fired from a job she desperately needed. Pride had its place, but it didn't pay rent or medical bills. "Okay," she said quietly. "Thank you." Vincent nodded, seeming to relax slightly at her acceptance. He pulled a business card from his pocket. Heavy stock, simply printed with a name and phone number. "This is Marcus Romano, head of my security. He'll be in touch tomorrow to discuss arrangements. If anything concerns you before then, call him directly. He'll answer." Emma took the card, turning it over in her hands. The weight of it felt substantial, real. This was actually happening. She'd thrown herself in front of a stranger, and now her entire life was veering in a direction she couldn't have imagined 12 hours ago. "What would have happened if I hadn't moved?" she asked suddenly. "If I hadn't heard that sound? If I'd been a second slower?" Vincent's expression grew distant, dark. "I would have died." The shooter had a clear line of sight. My security was positioned wrong, too focused on the entrance, not enough on the interior. It was a failure that won't happen again. "I'm glad you're okay," Emma said, and meant it. Despite everything, the danger, the complications, the completely upended normalcy of her life, she was genuinely glad this man was still alive. Something shifted in Vincent's expression at her words. He stood, that careful distance returning. "I should let you rest. You've been through an ordeal. Marcus will contact you tomorrow." He moved toward the door but paused at the threshold, turning back. "Emma, that sound you heard, the click. Most people wouldn't have recognized it. Most people would have frozen. The fact that you moved, that you acted, you have good instincts. Trust them." Then he was gone, leaving Emma alone in the too bright hospital room with a business card, a bandaged shoulder, and the growing realization that her life had just become far more complicated than she'd ever imagined. She looked down at the card again. Marcus Romano, head of security, a number she could call if anything concerned her. Outside her window, the rain had stopped. leaving the city washed clean and glittering with reflected lights. Manhattan sprawled beneath her, millions of lives intersecting in endless patterns, most of them following predictable paths from day to day. Emma had the sudden, certain feeling that her path had just veered somewhere entirely different. She'd walked into work expecting an ordinary Thursday. She was leaving having saved a man's life, a man whose world existed in shadows most people never saw. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Sarah. OMG, Emma. Are you okay? Everyone's talking about what happened. You're a hero. Call me. A hero. The word felt strange. She didn't feel heroic. She felt tired, confused, and increasingly aware that she'd stepped into something much larger than herself. Detective Morrison's warning echoed in her mind. These people have long memories. Vincent's acknowledgement of debt. The business card with a security chief's number. Emma laid back against the pillow, her shoulder aching with each breath. Tomorrow she'd have to deal with the practical realities, telling her mother something that wouldn't worry her too much, figuring out her work situation, meeting with this Marcus Romano person. Tonight she just needed to process the simple, staggering fact that she'd nearly died, that someone else had nearly died, and that a split-second decision had changed everything. Through the window, a black SUV pulled into the hospital parking lot below. It sat there, engine idling, and though Emma couldn't see inside the tinted windows, she had the distinct feeling someone was watching, keeping guard. Vincent Moretti's security, she realized. Already in place, already protecting her. She closed her eyes, exhaustion finally winning over the adrenaline that had kept her alert. Tomorrow her new reality would begin. Tonight she'd let herself rest, surrounded by the beeping of hospital monitors and the distant sounds of the city that never slept. Her last conscious thought was of that moment in the restaurant, the click of metal, the instant of decision, the feeling of moving without thought. In that fraction of a second, two lives had changed course. Vincent Moretti had lived, and Emma Walsh had stepped into a world she didn't yet understand. Tomorrow would bring answers. Tomorrow would bring complications. Tomorrow would bring Marcus Romano and security arrangements and all the practical details of what came next. But tonight, Emma just breathed, alive and conscious of being alive in a way she'd never quite experienced before. The world felt different now, sharper and more dangerous, but also more real somehow. She'd seen something that most people only witnessed in stories. She'd acted when action mattered. And now she'd have to live with the consequences of that courage, whatever they might be. Outside, the black SUV continued its vigil, a silent guardian in the night. Inside, Emma Walsh drifted toward sleep, her shoulder throbbing with each heartbeat, a reminder that she was alive, that he was alive, and that everything had changed with the simple, unmistakable sound of a trigger being pulled back. Click. The sound would echo in her dreams for weeks to come. Emma woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the insistent buzzing of her phone. For a disorienting moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then her shoulder throbbed, and the previous night came flooding back. The hospital. The shooting. Vincent Moretti. She reached for her phone with her good arm, squinting at the screen. 43 text messages, 17 missed calls, and notifications from news apps that made her stomach sink. She tapped one. Hero Waitress saves diner in Tribeca restaurant incident. Below the headline was a photo, grainy security camera footage showing her throwing herself across the booth. Her face was visible enough to be recognizable. The article named her, mentioned Côte d'Azur, and while it carefully avoided specifics about Vincent, it made clear that she'd prevented something terrible. No, 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 Emma whispered, scrolling through more articles. Her name was everywhere. Someone had even found her social media accounts. Her Instagram was flooded with comments from strangers, her privacy invaded by thousands of people she'd never met. A soft knock interrupted her spiraling anxiety. A different nurse from last night peeked in. "Good morning, Ms. Walsh. How's the pain?" "Manageable," Emma lied. Her shoulder felt like someone had taken a hot iron to it. "The doctor will be in shortly to discharge you. There's also a gentleman waiting in the lobby who says he's here to drive you home." A Mr. Romano? Marcus Romano. Vincent's head of security. Emma had almost forgotten about that part. Right. Yes. Thank you. After the nurse left, Emma forced herself out of bed, moving carefully to avoid jarring her injury. Someone, she assumed Vincent's people, had brought her a change of clothes. Dark jeans, a loose gray sweater that would accommodate her bandaged shoulder, and even new sneakers in her exact size. The thoughtfulness of it made her uncomfortable. These people had access to information about her that she'd never provided. 20 minutes later, cleaned up and dressed, Emma made her way to the hospital lobby. She spotted Marcus Romano immediately. He stood out like a boulder in a stream, people unconsciously giving him a wide berth. He was perhaps 50, built like someone who'd spent decades maintaining physical readiness, with gray-streaked dark hair and eyes that missed nothing. Ms. Walsh, he approached with surprising grace for a man his size. I'm Marcus Romano. Mr. Moretti asked me to ensure you got home safely. I could have taken a cab, Emma said, though even as the words left her mouth she realized how naive they sounded. Marcus's expression suggested he agreed, but was too professional to say so. This way, please. The black SUV parked at the hospital entrance was identical to the one she'd seen keeping watch last night. Marcus opened the rear door for her, and Emma slid into leather seats that probably cost more than her monthly rent. The interior smelled of expensive cologne and leather, the tinted windows turning the bright morning into something more subdued. Marcus took the driver's seat, and as they pulled into traffic, Emma watched the city roll past. Friday morning in Manhattan, people rushing to work, vendors setting up, the endless movement of a city that never paused. 2 days ago, she'd been part of that flow, just another person trying to make it through the week. Now she sat in an SUV with a security guard because she'd thrown herself in front of a man connected to organized crime. Mr. Moretti wanted me to brief you on the situation, Marcus said, his eyes on the road but his attention clearly on her as well. First, the immediate threat. The individual who attempted to harm Mr. Moretti is in custody, but he's part of a larger organization. They invested significant resources into last night's plan. Its failure makes them look weak, and you're the reason for that failure. Emma's hands tightened in her lap. Detective Morrison mentioned something similar. Morrison is competent, but he has to work within legal frameworks. I don't. Marcus's tone was matter-of-fact, not threatening, but absolutely clear. Which means I can be more direct with you. These people will want to send a message. They'll want to demonstrate that interfering with their business has consequences. You need protection, and you need it immediately. For how long? Until we resolve the situation. Could be weeks, could be longer. Mr. Moretti is working on a solution, but these things take time. They drove through the streets of Brooklyn, eventually pulling up to Emma's apartment building, a converted brownstone in Prospect Heights that had seen better decades. The neighborhood was safe enough, but the building itself was tired, with a front door that didn't always lock properly and windows that rattled in strong winds. Marcus studied the building with obvious disapproval. This is where you live? It's what I can afford on a waitress's salary, Emma said, defensive despite herself. He didn't respond, but she could see him cataloging vulnerabilities. The fire escape, the alley access, the ground floor windows. When they entered the building, he insisted on checking her apartment before letting her inside. Emma's studio was exactly as she'd left it yesterday, a neat but cramped space with a Murphy bed, a tiny kitchen alcove, and bookshelves crammed with textbooks and novels. Her graduate school project materials covered the small desk. Research on trauma-informed care practices stacked beside her laptop. It was modest, but it was hers, a space she'd carved out through sheer determination and endless double shifts. Marcus checked the windows, the fire escape access, the bathroom. You can't stay here, he said finally. Too many access points, too isolated. If they come for you, you'll have nowhere to go. This is my home. It's a security nightmare. Marcus turned to face her fully, his expression not unkind but absolutely firm. Ms. Walsh, I understand this is difficult. Your life has been disrupted through no fault of your own. But the reality is that you're in danger. Real, immediate danger. My job is to keep you alive, and I can't do that if you're in a ground floor apartment with 3 separate entry points and no security system. Emma sank onto her bed, the events of the past 12 hours finally overwhelming her. What am I supposed to do? I can't just leave my life. You can temporarily adjust your life to stay alive. Marcus softened slightly, pulling over her desk chair and sitting down. Mr. Moretti has a secure property in Westchester County. It's isolated, well guarded, and set up to handle exactly this kind of situation. He's offering it to you until we can neutralize the threat. Live in Vincent Moretti's house? I don't even know him. You saved his life. That creates a bond whether you intended it or not. And right now that bond is the thing keeping you safe. Marcus leaned forward. These people operate on rules you don't understand. They see debts and obligations where you see random chance. Mr. Moretti owes you, and he's a man who takes his debt seriously. but they also see you as someone who interfered with their business, and they take that seriously too. Emma's phone buzzed again. She glanced at it. Michael from Côte d'Azur. She answered, already knowing what he'd say. Emma, I'm so sorry. Michael's voice carried genuine regret. The owner is shutting down the investigation, and corporate has decided they think it's best if you take some time away from the restaurant. Indefinitely. You're firing me. She'd expected it, but the reality still stung. It's not personal. You know I think you're an excellent server, but after last night we can't. The liability, the attention, the potential for more incidents. I'm sorry. You'll receive 2 weeks severance and will provide a reference for future employment. I wish I could do more. Emma ended the call without responding, staring at the phone in her hand. Just like that, her income was gone. The job that had been keeping her afloat, paying her bills, covering her mother's medical expenses, gone because she'd made a split-second decision to save someone's life. That was your employer, Marcus said. It wasn't a question. Former employer. Mr. Moretti anticipated this. He's prepared to cover your lost wages plus additional compensation for the disruption to your life. I don't want charity. It's not charity. It's obligation. Marcus stood, moving to her window and adjusting the curtain slightly. You paid a price for saving his life. He's simply ensuring you don't continue paying that price. There's honor in accepting help when it's genuinely offered. Emma wanted to argue, but exhaustion and pain were catching up with her. Her shoulder throbbed despite the medication. Her head ached from stress, and the walls of her small apartment suddenly felt suffocating rather than cozy. I need to think about it, she said finally. Take the day. But Ms. Walsh? Don't take too long. Every hour you spend in this building is an hour you're vulnerable. Marcus handed her a new business card, this one with both his phone number and an address. If you decide to accept Mr. Moretti's offer, call this number. Someone will be here within 30 minutes to help you pack. If you decide not to accept, call anyway. We'll arrange alternative protection, though I strongly advise the first option. After Marcus left, promising to have someone watching the building, Emma was alone with her thoughts. She carefully changed into comfortable clothes, made tea with shaking hands, and tried to process the impossible situation she'd found herself in. Her phone rang. Her mother. Emma's heart sank. She'd managed to avoid calling last night, but her mother had clearly seen the news. Emma Catherine Walsh. You answer this phone right now. Hi, Mom. Don't hi, Mom me. I'm seeing your face all over the news, something about a shooting at your restaurant. Are you hurt? What happened? Emma took a breath, trying to find a version of events that wouldn't send her mother into a panic. There was an incident at work last night. Someone tried to cause trouble, and I helped prevent something bad from happening. I got a minor injury, just a graze on my shoulder, already stitched up and healing. I'm fine, Mom. Really? A minor injury? Emma, the news is calling you a hero. They're showing pictures of you in an ambulance. That doesn't look minor to me. The news always exaggerates everything. I promise I'm okay. I might need to take some time away from work while things settle down. There was a long pause. Her mother knew her too well. Emma, what aren't you telling me? Nothing, Mom. I just want to make sure everything is safe before I go back to my normal routine. It's a precaution, that's all. They talked for another 20 minutes. Emma carefully editing details, downplaying dangers, trying to keep her mother calm. After she hung up, Emma felt the weight of yet another complication. Her mother was in remission but still fragile, still recovering from chemotherapy that had devastated her system. Stress could trigger complications. Emma couldn't let her know the full truth. The afternoon passed in a blur of phone calls and messages. Sarah wanted details. Friends from her graduate program expressed concern. Her landlord, having seen the news, called to ask uncomfortable questions about whether trouble would be coming to the building. The attention was overwhelming, invasive, exhausting. By evening, Emma stood at her window watching the street below. Marcus had been right. The building was vulnerable. She could see a dozen ways someone could get in, and she had no way to stop them. The false sense of security she'd always felt here had evaporated, leaving only anxiety in its wake. Her phone rang. An unknown number. Ms. Walsh, this is Vincent Moretti. I wanted to check on you personally. His voice carried that same calm authority she remembered from the restaurant, but there was something else beneath it. Genuine concern, perhaps, or at least a convincing approximation of it. I'm managing, Emma said. Marcus tells me you're hesitant about accepting my offer of protection. It's a lot to process. Moving into a stranger's home because I might be in danger from people I don't know, all because I did what anyone would have done. Not anyone, Vincent interrupted gently. Most people freeze in crisis situations. Their brains lock up, unable to process what's happening. You didn't freeze. You acted, decisively and courageously. That makes you exceptional, Emma. It also, unfortunately, makes you a target. Emma leaned her forehead against the cool window glass. I just wanted to finish my degree, pay my bills, take care of my mom. I wasn't looking for exceptional. No one ever is. But sometimes exceptional finds us anyway. He paused. I can't force you to accept my protection, but I can tell you that I've spent 20 years in a world where threats are real and consequences are permanent. The people who planned last night's incident won't simply forgive and forget. They'll see you as unfinished business. That's what Marcus said. Marcus is rarely wrong about these things. He's kept me alive for 15 years, which is longer than most people in my position last. Vincent's tone shifted slightly, becoming more personal. Emma, you saved my life. That means something to me, more than you probably understand. Let me do what I can to protect yours. She closed her eyes, feeling the decision crystallizing. Pride wanted her to refuse, to maintain her independence, to prove she could handle this herself. But practicality, the same quality that had gotten her through years of struggle, recognized the truth. She was out of her depth, in danger she didn't fully understand, and being offered help by someone who actually understood the threat. Okay, she said quietly. I'll accept your offer, but I want to be clear. This is temporary, just until things are safe again. Understood. Marcus will coordinate everything, pack light. Anything you need that you don't bring, we can provide. I'll see you tomorrow, Emma. After the call ended, Emma sat in the growing darkness of her apartment, trying to reconcile the different versions of herself. Yesterday's Emma had been a graduate student and waitress, someone whose biggest worry was making rent and finishing her thesis on time. Today's Emma was someone on the news, someone mixed up with organized crime, someone about to move into a mansion in Westchester because her life was in danger. She packed methodically, clothes for a few weeks, her laptop and school materials, personal items that would make an unfamiliar place feel less foreign, photos of her mother, her favorite books, the small things that defined her life. Marcus called at 8. I'll be there at 9 tomorrow morning with a team. We'll move you quickly and quietly. Pack tonight. Be ready to leave as soon as we arrive. Marcus, what exactly am I walking into? Mr. Moretti's estate is comfortable and secure. You'll have your own space, privacy when you want it. This isn't imprisonment, Ms. Walsh, it's protection. There's a difference. After they hung up, Emma made one more circuit of her small apartment, memorizing details. The water stain on the ceiling that looked like a rabbit, the way afternoon light came through the east window, the loose floorboard by the kitchen that creaked under weight. This space had been hers, a testament to her hard work and determination. Tomorrow she'd leave it behind for something unknown. She slept fitfully that night, her shoulder aching, dreams filled with the sound of that metallic click and the moment of decision. In her dreams she hesitated, just a fraction of a second longer, and everything went differently. She woke repeatedly, checking her phone, watching shadows move across the ceiling. At some point in the darkest hours, she got up and looked out the window. The black SUV sat at the curb, a silent guardian. Someone was watching, keeping her safe even as she slept. The knowledge should have been comforting. Instead, it reinforced how drastically her life had changed. Marcus arrived at exactly 9 the next morning with 2 other men, both with the same capable, alert demeanor. They moved her belongings efficiently, professionally, speaking in low voices and checking the hallway before letting her leave the building. The drive to Westchester took 45 minutes, leaving the city behind for suburbs that gradually gave way to more rural landscape. They turned onto a private road, passing through gates that opened automatically, continuing down a tree-lined drive that seemed to go on forever. The estate, when it finally appeared, took Emma's breath away. It was elegant without being ostentatious. A sprawling property with manicured grounds, mature trees providing privacy, and the main house built in a classical style that suggested old money and quiet power. This wasn't just wealth. This was generational security, the kind of property that represented decades of accumulation. This is where Vincent Moretti lives? Emma asked, unable to keep the surprise from her voice. One of several properties, Marcus said. But yes, this is his primary residence. Secure, private, and far enough from the city to make unexpected visits difficult. They pulled up to the main entrance, where Vincent himself stood waiting. He'd traded his restaurant formal wear for dark slacks and a charcoal sweater, somehow looking both casual and commanding. As Emma stepped out of the SUV, their eyes met, and she felt that same jolt of recognition from the hospital. This man whose life she'd saved, who now represented both safety and danger in equal measure. "Welcome," Vincent said, his voice warm despite the formal circumstances. "I know this isn't ideal, but I hope we can make you comfortable." Emma looked up at the house, at the grounds stretching in every direction, at the man who'd just invited her into his world. Somewhere in the back of her mind, a voice whispered that she was making a terrible mistake, that she should run back to her tiny apartment and take her chances. But the louder voice, the practical one, the one that had kept her alive this long, knew she'd already made her choice. The moment she'd thrown herself across that booth, she'd started down a path that led here. Now she just had to see where it went. "Thank you," she said, meaning it despite her reservations. "I appreciate everything you're doing." Vincent nodded, something unreadable in his expression. "Come inside. Let me show you your space. Then we can talk about what happens next." As Emma followed him into the house, she caught Marcus and Vincent exchanging a look, some communication passing between them that she couldn't decipher. The door closed behind her with a soft, final click. She was inside now, protected but also trapped, safe but also ensnared. The debt Vincent Moretti owed her was being paid with shelter and security, but Emma was beginning to understand that in this world, debts had a way of creating new obligations, binding people together in ways that weren't easily undone. Her old life, the apartment, the job, the familiar routine was already receding into memory. Whatever came next would be something entirely different. She just hoped she was strong enough to handle it. 3 weeks had passed since Emma Walsh moved into Vincent Moretti's estate, and she was still discovering new aspects of the property. The main house sprawled across 12,000 square feet, with rooms she hadn't yet explored and corridors that seemed to lead to unexpected places. Her suite occupied the entire east wing. Bedroom, sitting room, private bathroom with a soaking tub, and a small balcony overlooking gardens that were maintained by a staff she rarely saw. It was beautiful. It was comfortable. It was also, unmistakably, a gilded cage. Emma stood at her bedroom window watching the November morning unfold across the grounds. Frost silvered the grass, and bare trees etched dark patterns against the pale sky. In the city, she would have been rushing to a morning shift, grabbing coffee from the corner bodega, navigating crowded subway cars. Here, everything moved at a different pace, quieter, more controlled, carefully orchestrated. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "How's the temporary job going? You've been so vague about details." Emma had told her mother she'd taken a short-term position with better pay, a convenient fiction that explained her sudden change in circumstances without revealing the dangerous truth. The lies were necessary, but they weighed on her, adding to the strange isolation she felt. She typed back, "Going well. Quiet work. Gives me time to focus on my thesis. How are you feeling?" The response came quickly. "Good days and bad days, but more good lately. Dr. Chen is pleased with my progress. Miss you, though. When can I visit this mysterious new workplace?" "Soon," Emma lied. "Love you, Mom." She set down her phone, guilt settling heavy in her chest. Before all this, she'd visited her mother every Sunday, bringing groceries and helping around the house. Now, Marcus had made it clear that maintaining her normal patterns was too dangerous. Her mother's safety meant staying away, another price Emma was paying for that split-second decision in the restaurant. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Maria, the housekeeper who'd been kind without being intrusive, stood at the door with a breakfast tray. "Mr. Moretti thought you might prefer eating in your room this morning," Maria said, her accent carrying hints of her native Portugal. "But he wanted me to tell you that the library is available if you'd like to work there." "Better light than up here," he said. Emma had been curious about the library since arriving. She'd glimpsed it once through an open door, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, leather furniture, tall windows flooding the space with natural light. Vincent kept the room locked, though, and she'd been too uncomfortable to ask about access. "Thank you, Maria. Tell him I appreciate it." After breakfast, Emma gathered her laptop and research materials, making her way through the house's elegant corridors. The library door stood open now, an invitation. She stepped inside and caught her breath. The room was magnificent. 3 walls lined with books, organized with obvious care, not just for show but genuinely read, with worn spines and scattered bookmarks. The 4th wall was dominated by windows overlooking the estate's western grounds. A massive mahogany desk occupied one corner, but comfortable reading chairs were scattered throughout. each with its own lamp and side table. What caught Emma's attention most, though, were the architectural drawings framed on the walls between bookshelves, detailed blueprints and sketches of buildings. Some she recognized as famous New York landmarks, others she didn't know. Each was labeled with dates and locations, rendered in precise technical detail that spoke of professional training. "I studied architecture at Columbia." Vincent's voice came from behind her. "Before my father died and I had to take over the family business." Emma turned to find him leaning against the doorframe, dressed casually in dark jeans and a gray Henley. It was Saturday, she realized. Even in this strange new existence, weekends apparently still meant something. "These are beautiful," Emma said, gesturing to the drawings. "Did you do them?" "Most of them, yes, my senior project." He moved into the room, hands in his pockets, an unusual hesitance in his demeanor. "I was going to work for a firm in Manhattan, had an offer lined up. Then my father had a heart attack, and suddenly I was 23 years old running businesses I barely understood." It was the most personal thing he'd shared since she'd arrived. Their interactions over the past 3 weeks had been polite but distant, passing each other in hallways, brief conversations over meals when they coincidentally ate at the same time, his careful respect for her privacy. This felt different, like a door opening. "Do you regret it?" Emma asked. "Not pursuing architecture?" Vincent considered the question, studying one of his own drawings. "Regret is complicated. I regret the circumstances that made the choice for me, but I can't regret the path I took without re-getting everything that came from it. The people I've protected, the stability I've built, even this house." He glanced at her. "Even being in that restaurant that night." Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks and turned her attention to the bookshelves to hide it. The collection was eclectic. Classic literature alongside modern fiction, philosophy texts next to architecture books. Everything from Marcus Aurelius to contemporary mysteries. "You're welcome to read anything you'd like," Vincent said. "I meant what I said about the library being available. I know these weeks have been difficult. Isolation is its own kind of hardship." "It's not the isolation exactly," Emma admitted. "I'm used to being alone. It's the not knowing. How long will this last? What happens when it's over? Whether I'll even have a life to go back to." Vincent was quiet for a moment, then gestured to the seating area near the windows. "Sit with me? I think we should talk about some things I've been avoiding." They settled into facing chairs, morning light pouring through the windows between them. Outside, Emma could see Marcus and another security team member doing a perimeter walk, their vigilance a constant reminder of why she was here. "The situation is more complicated than I initially explained," Vincent began. "The organization that sent the person to the restaurant, they're part of a larger network, old families with traditional ways of handling business disputes. When their plan failed, it created a power vacuum. Some want to try again. Others see it as a sign they should negotiate instead, which means my people are in conversations with their people, trying to find a resolution that doesn't involve further incidents. But these negotiations take time. Trust has to be rebuilt. Assurances have to be made." He met her eyes. "I won't lie to you, Emma. This could take months, not weeks." The words settled like stones in her stomach. Months of her life in suspension, months of lying to her mother, months of her thesis work gathering dust while the world moved on without her. "What about my degree?" she asked quietly. "I was supposed to defend my thesis in March. If I'm stuck here—" "You're not stuck, you're protected, there's a difference." Vincent leaned forward, his expression intent. "I've spoken with the dean of your program. Confidentially. You can complete your work remotely, and when it's time to defend, we'll arrange appropriate security. Your education doesn't have to stop because of this situation." Emma stared at him. "You contacted my school?" "Through appropriate channels with respect for your privacy. I didn't explain details, just that you were dealing with a temporary security situation related to your work at the restaurant. The dean was sympathetic. Apparently, you're one of their top students." She didn't know whether to be grateful or disturbed that he'd reached into her life without asking. Both feelings tangled together, creating confusion she couldn't quite name. "I should have asked first," Vincent acknowledged, reading her expression. "I apologize. I'm used to solving problems efficiently, and sometimes I forget that efficiency can feel like overreach." "It does," Emma said honestly. "But I also appreciate it. I've been worried about school." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the tension easing. Outside, a crow landed on the windowsill, peered inside with bright eyes, then flew away. "Can I ask you something?" Emma ventured. "Your father, what was he like?" Vincent's expression shifted, becoming distant, complicated, traditional. He built everything from nothing, came from Sicily with barely any money, and created an empire through sheer determination. He had very specific ideas about honor, about loyalty, about how men should conduct themselves. He paused. He wasn't cruel, but he wasn't warm either. Business always came first. I spent my childhood trying to earn his approval and my early 20s trying to be anyone but him. And now I run the same businesses he built, make similar decisions, protect the same people he protected. I've become him in ways I swore I never would. The irony isn't lost on me. Emma heard the genuine conflict in his voice, a man caught between the life he'd wanted and the life he'd inherited. It was a feeling she understood, in her own way. How many nights had she lain awake wondering what her life would look like if her father hadn't left when she was 12, if her mother hadn't gotten sick, if financial necessity hadn't dictated every choice she'd made. "Do you think we ever really choose our paths?" she asked. "Or do circumstances just push us in directions and we call it choice to feel better about it?" Vincent smiled, a real smile that transformed his usually guarded features. "That's a very philosophical question for a Saturday morning. Hazard of graduate school. Every conversation becomes an existential inquiry." "Then, philosophically speaking," Vincent said, "I think we choose how we walk the path we're on, even if we didn't choose the path itself. You didn't choose to be in that restaurant the night someone came for me, but you chose to act. That choice was entirely yours. And now I'm here because of it. You're here because of consequences beyond your control, but you're still making choices. How you respond, whether you let this define you, what you do with the time you have." He gestured around the library. "You could spend these months resenting the situation. Instead, you're working on your thesis, reading, trying to maintain as much normalcy as possible. Those are choices." Emma found herself smiling despite everything. "Are you always this thoughtful? Or is this special Saturday morning philosophy, Vincent?" "I have my moments," he said dryly. "Usually around 3 a.m. when I can't sleep. That's when I work on my thesis. Apparently, trauma and insomnia are great for academic productivity." They both laughed, and the sound felt strange and wonderful, a moment of genuine connection in the midst of everything else. For just a second, Emma could almost forget the circumstances that brought her here, could almost imagine they were just two people getting to know each other in a beautiful library on a Saturday morning. The moment shattered when Marcus appeared at the door, his expression grave. "Vincent, we have a situation." The transformation was immediate. Vincent stood, every trace of the thoughtful man from seconds ago, replaced by someone harder, more focused. "What kind of situation?" "Communications intercept. One of our people has been feeding information to the Castellano organization. They know details they shouldn't. Security rotations, vehicle movements, property layouts." Emma watched Vincent's jaw tighten. "How long?" "At least 3 weeks. Maybe longer." Marcus glanced at Emma, then back to Vincent. "They know she's here." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Emma felt her breath catch. 3 weeks of safety, of routine, of gradually lowering her guard. All of it based on the assumption that this estate was secure, unknown to the people who wanted to harm Vincent. "Who?" Vincent's voice was deadly quiet. "Still investigating. But Vincent, if they know she's here, they'll move soon. They won't waste the advantage." Emma stood, her legs unsteady. "What does that mean? What do we do?" Vincent turned to her, and in his eyes she saw something she hadn't seen before. Genuine fear. Not for himself, she realized, but for her. "It means we accelerate our timeline. Marcus, implement Protocol 7. I want double security on all access points. Sweep the entire property for vulnerabilities, and find out who the leak is. Today." "Understood." Marcus left, already speaking into his radio. Emma and Vincent stood alone in the library, the peaceful morning irrevocably shattered. She thought about her mother's text, the normalcy of breakfast, the way sunlight had streamed through these windows just minutes ago, how quickly everything could change. "I need you to trust me," Vincent said, moving closer. "Whatever happens in the next few days, whatever you see or hear, remember that everything I do is about keeping people safe, including you, especially you. What are you going to do? Find the person who betrayed us. Make sure they can't provide any more information. Send a message that disloyalty has consequences." His expression was hard, unreadable. "This is the part of my world I've tried to keep you away from. But you're in it now, whether either of us wanted that." Emma thought about the man who'd shared his regrets about architecture, who'd contacted her school to help with her degree, who kept a library full of beloved books. Then she looked at the man standing before her now, someone capable of things she probably didn't want to imagine, someone whose power came from being willing to do what others wouldn't. "I'm not naive," she said quietly. "I know what you are, what you do. I knew it the first night. The detective told me, the news articles filled in the rest. But Vincent," she paused, choosing words carefully. "Whatever you have to do to keep everyone safe, I understand. Just don't become someone you'll hate when you look in the mirror." Something flickered across his face, surprise maybe, or gratitude. "That's asking a lot. You asked me to trust you. I'm asking you to remember who you wanted to be before circumstances made the choice for you." Before Vincent could respond, shouting erupted from somewhere in the house. Both of them moved toward the sound, finding several security personnel gathered in the main hallway. A man Emma vaguely recognized from the security team was being escorted, firmly but not roughly, between two of his colleagues. His face was pale, his expression resigned. "Vincent, I can explain," the man started. "Save it for Marcus." Vincent cut him off, his voice cold. "I don't want to hear your justifications." Emma watched as they took the man away, presumably to one of the estate's outbuildings she'd noticed but never entered. She felt sick knowing what this meant. Someone who'd been trusted had sold them out, had put everyone at risk for reasons she'd probably never understand. "Go back to your room," Vincent said, not looking at her. "Stay there until Marcus or I tell you otherwise." "Vincent, please, Emma." He finally met her eyes, and the vulnerability she saw there was startling. "I'm about to handle something unpleasant. I don't want you to see it. I don't want that version of me to be what you remember." She wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could handle reality, but the plea in his voice stopped her. This was about his shame, not her capacity to witness it. "Okay," she agreed softly. "But afterward, talk to me, please?" He nodded once, then turned and strode away, his shoulders set with determination. Emma watched him go, then made her way back upstairs on unsteady legs. In her suite, she tried to focus on her thesis, on the research about trauma-informed care practices that suddenly felt painfully ironic. But her mind kept drifting to what was happening somewhere else on the property, to the man who'd betrayed them, to Vincent becoming someone he'd tried to avoid becoming. Hours passed. The sun moved across the sky, afternoon light replacing morning brightness. Emma paced, read, tried to work, failed. She thought about calling her mother, but couldn't imagine faking normalcy right now. A knock came at her door just after 4. She opened it to find Vincent standing there, looking exhausted. He'd changed clothes, the gray Henley replaced with a navy sweater, and his hair was slightly damp as though he'd showered. But his eyes carried a weariness that went deeper than physical fatigue. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. Emma stepped aside, and he entered her sitting room, moving to the balcony doors but not opening them. Just standing there, looking out at the grounds. "His name was David Chen," Vincent said after a long silence. "Worked for me for 3 years. Good at his job, reliable, no signs of discontent. But his brother owed money to the Castellanos, gambling debts that had spiraled out of control. They offered him a deal, provide information, and his brother's debt disappears. What happened to him? He told us everything he'd shared with them, every detail he'd passed along. Then I gave him an envelope with enough money to disappear. Far away, somewhere the Castellanos won't find him. He has 24 hours to leave the state." Emma stared at him. "You let him go?" "I gave him a choice. Leave voluntarily or face consequences from people less forgiving than me. He took the money and left 30 minutes ago." Vincent finally turned to face her. "You thought I'd do something worse. I didn't know what to think. Most people in my position would have made an example of him, sent a message about betrayal, and part of me wanted to, the part that's my father's son, that understands the rules of this world." He moved to one of her sitting room chairs, sinking into it like a man carrying impossible weight. "But then I remembered what you said, about not becoming someone I'd hate in the mirror." Emma sat across from him, her heart aching at the visible struggle on his face. "You did the right thing." "Did I?" "In this world, mercy is often mistaken for weakness. By showing compassion, I might have invited more betrayal. Or you showed that you're different, that you can be strong without being cruel." Vincent studied her for a long moment. "You see the best in people, even people who probably don't deserve it. I see potential. It's the social worker in me, always believing people can be better than they are." "And what do you see when you look at me, Emma? A man trying to be better? Or someone fooling himself about what he really is?" The question was raw, vulnerable in a way she'd never heard from him. Emma thought about the past 3 weeks, the careful respect for her privacy, the library invitation, the help with her degree. She thought about this morning's conversation, about a young man who'd wanted to build things instead of running an empire. She thought about his decision today, choosing compassion when cruelty would have been easier. "I see someone caught between who he was raised to be and who he wants to become," she said carefully. "I see someone carrying impossible weight and trying to do right by people even when the rules don't allow for right. I see someone worth saving. You already saved me once." "I'm not talking about that night at the restaurant." Emma leaned forward, needing him to understand. "I'm talking about saving you from becoming everything you're afraid of becoming, from losing the part of yourself that designed those buildings, that filled a library with books that shows mercy when everyone expects ruthlessness." Vincent was quiet for so long that Emma thought she'd overstepped. Then he reached across the space between them and took her hand, a simple gesture that somehow felt monumental. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "Be what my position requires while staying who I want to be. It feels impossible most days." "Nothing worthwhile is easy," Emma said, repeating words her mother had told her countless times. "But impossible and difficult aren't the same thing." They sat like that as the afternoon light faded toward evening, hands linked, two people finding unexpected connection in the midst of chaos. Emma felt the calluses on his palm, evidence of work beyond business dealings and corporate decisions. Vincent's thumb traced small circles on the back of her hand, an unconscious gesture that sent warmth spreading through her chest. "I should let you rest," Vincent said finally, though he made no move to leave. "It's been a difficult day. For both of us." Emma reluctantly withdrew her hand, already missing the contact. "Vincent, thank you for choosing differently." He stood, moving toward the door, but paused at the threshold the same way he had at the hospital weeks ago. "Emma, that first night, you said you just reacted, didn't think about it. Do you regret it? Everything that came after?" Emma considered the question honestly. Her old life was gone, her safety compromised, her future uncertain. She'd lied to her mother, lost her job, been pulled into a world of danger and moral complexity she'd never imagined navigating. By any objective measure, that split-second decision had cost her everything. But when she looked at Vincent standing in her doorway, exhausted but still fighting to be better than his circumstances demanded, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. "Ask me again when this is over," she said, "when we both know how the story ends." He smiled. Small, sad, genuine. "Deal." After he left, Emma stood on her balcony watching night fall over the estate. Somewhere beyond the tree line, people were planning things she didn't want to imagine. Somewhere in the city, her mother was going about her evening routine, unaware of the danger her daughter faced. Somewhere in this house, Vincent Moretti was probably in his study, making more impossible choices between mercy and survival. Emma's phone buzzed. A text from her thesis advisor. "Spoke with the dean. Whatever you're dealing with, we've got your back. Focus on staying safe. Deadline can wait." The kindness of it brought tears to her eyes. Not everyone in her old life had disappeared. Some threads still connected her to the person she'd been before. She was about to go inside when she saw it. A flash of light near the perimeter, too bright to be natural. Then another. Then the sound reached her. A deep boom that rattled the windows and sent birds exploding from nearby trees. The explosion lit up the night, flames rising from somewhere beyond the estate's main gates. Emma's suite door burst open. Marcus, his expression grim. "Ms. Walsh, we need to move you to the secure room. Now." "What's happening?" "They're here. The Castellanos. And they've just declared war." As Marcus escorted her rapidly through the house, Emma heard shouting, saw security personnel moving with urgent purpose, watched Vincent emerge from his study with a phone pressed to his ear and fury in his eyes. Their gazes met across the hallway, a moment of connection, of fear, of determination. Then Marcus was pulling her down a hallway toward a section of the house she'd never entered, and Emma understood with crystal clarity that everything was about to change. Again. The secure room turned out to be exactly that. Reinforced walls, no windows, emergency supplies. Marcus left her there with a radio and instructions not to come out until he personally came back for her. Alone in the fortified silence, Emma sat on the small cot and thought about choices, about the click of a trigger in a restaurant, about a library filled with books and unbuilt buildings, about Vincent's hand in hers and the weight of impossible decisions. Outside, the night erupted with sound. Engines shouting, more distant booms. Inside, Emma waited, hoping that when morning came, Everyone she'd grown to care about would still be alive. She picked up the radio Marcus had left. Static crackled. Then Vincent's voice. All personnel, hold positions. Do not engage unless directly threatened. This ends tonight, one way or another. Emma closed her eyes and whispered into the darkness. Keep still. Just keep still. We'll get through this. The words felt like prayer, like promise, like the only hope she had left. Emma waited in the secure room while negotiations happened outside. When Marcus finally came for her, his expression was relieved. It's over. They reached an agreement. Vincent stood in his study, exhaustion mixed with hope on his face. They accepted the proposal. All families agreed to transition to legitimate operations over 5 years. You were right, Emma. They wanted a way out, they just needed someone to show them the path. So I'm safe now? Completely. The threat is resolved. 6 months later, Emma stood at her Columbia graduation, master's degree in hand. Her mother beamed from the audience. Vincent waited in the back, keeping his promise to give her space to finish school. That evening over dinner, Vincent took her hand. I'm not asking you to change your life for me, but I'd like to be part of it if you're willing. Emma smiled, thinking about that night in the restaurant, how one decision had changed everything. I'd like that too. Some lives are saved in moments. Others take time to rebuild, but both are worth fighting for.